Hello, everybody. Welcome. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you. My name is Aïcha Sebaa, and in case you don't know me, I'm a doctor of East Asian medicine. I specialize in women's health, and I also have special interests in natural skincare and dermatology. I'm really happy to see that some of you are joining me right now. It's exciting. Hello, hello. So today we're going to talk all about fasting, and I have some time right now, so I thought I'd sit down and do a live stream about fasting. It's just a much more efficient way to get across a lot more information. So I have some information prepared here, and I also have some questions that people have asked me. And what I've done is I've integrated a lot of the answers to the questions in the content that I'll be sharing today. And then if there are some more questions, I'll try to address those before my next patient comes in. So let's do this. So let's begin. Fasting, what is it? Fasting is not a diet. It's basically a pattern of eating where you go for a certain period of not eating. And something that we all practice at all times is fasting at night, usually, unless anybody's waking up for midnight snacks, which I'll talk about is a no-no. So fasting is basically just a period of time where you do not eat. And there are so many different types of fasting. There is the 1 meal a day type of fasting. There's the lean gains fasting for 16 hours, eating within an 8-hour window. There's alternate day fasting. There's religious fasting. So yeah, there's so many different types of fasting, and I do want to go more into all of these other types of fasting: intermittent fasting, extended fasting, therapeutic fasting, dry fasting, water fasting, all of that it's just so fascinating to me. But today specifically, I'm going to do more of a focus on Ramadan, because that's coming up very soon, inshallah, God willing. And so with Ramadan, that's a religious fast for 30 days. You dry fast from a little before sunrise to a little after sunset. So no water or food between that time period. And I'll talk a little bit about dry fasting, because I know that can be a concern for people. Like, okay, I get not having food, but what about water? Isn't that an essential thing? So I'm going to talk about that too. Let's see. Sweet spot at 16 hours. Yeah, that's a sweet spot for a lot of people. I think that's a good maintenance hour. Okay, Dr. Sachin Panda, he works at the Salk Institute. He's a researcher there, scientist. And as long as the bare minimum with fasting is that you go for 12 hours of not eating. 12 hours, which is very doable. Basically, if you start eating at 8 a.m., stop at 8 p.m. And that's the best for our circadian cycle. But yeah, so 12 hours is like the bare minimum for day to day. And then if you want to get some more of the metabolic benefits, then you can tighten your window a little bit more. Some people will completely skip breakfast. Some people will completely skip dinner. From the research that's coming out in terms of how humans are designed we're not nocturnal organisms. We thrive during the day and should be sleeping at night. So it's actually better to have your meal a little bit earlier, not necessarily immediately upon waking, but a little bit earlier, and end your meal about 3 to 4 hours before you go to sleep. That's really ideal. But of course, your lifestyle and all of that is really critical with all of this. So that's just more on a little primer with intermittent fasting and what it is. But let's talk a little bit more about Ramadan, since that's coming up. So some people are concerned about dry fasting, like how are you not having water? And so that's a prescription that's given to not just Muslims, but many other faiths that also practice dry fasting. And so the thing that you do not need to worry so much about in terms of dehydration is that our bodies are so intelligent, and they can actually create our bodies can create its own water. Fascinating. So I'm going to go into this part a little bit more, but autophagy is basically when our body breaks down old cell parts, and it's kind of like a cleanup system for the body. So our body will actually go in and say, okay, what cells do we not need right now? Let's break them apart and release the water from the cells. So that's one way. Another way is that when you start to go into breaking down fatty acids, our fatty acids are made up of basically, well, a part of it is carbon attached to hydrogen. So some of these hydrogen bonds will break off. We breathe in oxygen from the air, but there's also an OH attachment. And so the hydrogen and the oxygen will combine and you'll have H2O. So our body is very smart. Our body knows how to survive. We just don't want to put too much of a burden on the body where you're going for days without water. That's not good. But in the meantime, our body will go through a little bit of a stress. So stress, when we hear the word stress, right, we think that's something bad. Yes, chronic stress over a long period of time that's not managed properly is detrimental to our health. But having little bouts of stress every now and then is actually a good thing. There's a scientific term, it's called hormesis. Hormesis is basically a state where your body is going through a challenge. And what happens after that is that when your body overcomes that challenge in rest and recovery, you become stronger. So what's an example of hormesis that you can relate to day to day? Exercise, right? So when you go to the gym, you work out, it's probably not the most pleasant experience, but you work hard, and then you rest, and then you reap the benefits. You notice that the next time you work out, you can lift heavier, you can go a little bit longer with your endurance, all of that. So the same thing with our body. When we expose our bodies to extreme levels of cold or hot, sauna therapy, those things are actually good stressors for the body in short bouts, making sure that you have time for recovery. So fasting is actually a type of a stress, a hormesis, where basically you are stressing your body a little bit by depriving the body of nutrients so that the body could actually figure out and wake up other pathways for survival. And then we have our rest and recovery period after we break our fast, which is why the point of breaking the fast is so important. So it's not just that period where you're not eating or drinking, the hard part. The important part is how are we breaking our fast. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And I'm just watching the time as well. So let's see. All right, so what did I just talk about? I told you about dry fasting, why we shouldn't be so worried about it. Another thing about dry fasting, there's a Russian doctor who did extensive research on dry fasting. His name is Dr. Filanov. And he actually said that dry fasting is 3 times more effective than water fasting. And I think it has to do with that heightened stress response where your body is going in, breaking down cells a little bit at a higher rate than it would with wet fasting, with water fasting, because it needs that water. So pretty cool. There's wisdom to dry fasting, so don't worry about the not having water part. Now, I don't want people to be uncomfortable and feeling dehydrated. One of the things that happens when people feel like I'm dehydrated is they get headaches and they feel irritable and they just feel lack of energy. That is often a sign of an electrolyte imbalance, which is a little bit different. Of course, we can get an electrolyte imbalance from dehydration, so they do go hand in hand, but I'll address how to tackle hydration if we have time, inshallah. I noticed that I'm talking a lot more than I thought I would. Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for the positive feedback, guys, and waving to everybody who's waving to me too. All right, so let's move forward. So a little bit, okay, so autophagy, that's a state that your body will go into. You might read, if you get into this and nerd out about it as much as I do, you might find that there are forums or people who say that you can't kick into autophagy until 16 to 24 hours of fasting. Some reports say 32 to 36 hours of fasting. But I've actually found through my research that no, you can get into autophagy quicker. In fact, autophagy is happening consistently, no matter what you're doing in life. Our body is breaking things down. But we want our body to break things down kind of as much as it's building things up Otherwise, that's how we deal with things like obesity, because our body is in building mode more than it is in catabolic, breaking down mode. So autophagy can actually, there's something called intermeal autophagy, which is when you have your meals spread out. So you have something in the morning, you have something later for lunch, and then later for dinner, or you just have 2 meals, or you just have 1 meal. Like, we don't have to be eating as much as we have been told. It's like one of the biggest myths in nutrition. As long as you're, a healthy individual and all of that. I know that there are people with other conditions that may not be able to spread out their meals as much, or they're working on it. You have to work on it really slowly. But intermeal autophagy, there was a really good study that I wanted to share with you guys. It was a rodent study, so there are some issues with translating rodent studies to humans. I get that, but it's still worth mentioning. So they had these mice where they had one group where they could eat whatever they want at whatever time they want, and then they had another group where they said, okay, you guys we'll feed you isocaloric twice-a-day meals. So once in the morning, once in the evening. And what they found over time was that autophagy did happen. It decreased adiposity, so less chances of obesity for these mice. It enhanced their muscle mass, lean muscle mass, which people worry about how to maintain muscle mass while fasting, which I might have to do another video for because there's so much to say about that. But enhances muscle mass, suppresses gluconeogenesis. That's how it enhances muscle mass, because gluconeogenesis is when you take glucose from your muscles, you break down muscles to make sugar, which we generally want to do at a very small amount, just to break up and use old protein, but not at the expense of removing your hard-earned muscle mass. And it just, in general, the study found that it decreased obesity-associated metabolic diseases, and this is intermeal autophagy. So you can still, as long as you're spreading out your meals a little bit, you're good. And in preparation for Ramadan, which is where you don't eat again from a little before sunrise to a little after sunset, what we should be doing right now, the days leading up, is trying to decrease meal frequency as much as possible and to have more of a spacing between your meals. Let's see, some of the, so yeah, there are so many benefits. The way that autophagy works, in case some of you guys are interested, is it actually regulates it's a matter of gene expression. So when we have a lot of nutrients available, there's a gene called mTOR that decreases autophagy. When our energy supply is low energy supply, energy meaning nutrients, you're not taking in much nutrition, then AMPK is the gene that goes up, and also some protective proteins called sirtuins. They can activate autophagy too, and that could be done not just through fasting, but also with certain things that we eat. So if you really want to maximize this process, you would fast, and then you would also eat things that speed up this process. Some of the things are resveratrol, the peels are what are full of resveratrol. Mulberries, blueberries, and even dark chocolate are good. Dark chocolate is actually a pretty good suhoor food. When you have your suhoor meals, you want it to be something that's satiating, filling, and that's not going to cause too high of an insulin spike. Because when insulin goes up, and depending on how high you're spiking your insulin and bringing it down, it could cause a crash and make you feel really hungry. So I'm going to talk about what to eat a little bit later, though. So let's see. Okay, so I did want to mention this. And this comes also from like just Chinese medicine background of like really appreciating yin and yang theory. You want autophagy to happen, like the way I've talked about it, it sounds like a really good thing, and it is. It's our body's way of cleaning up, but you don't want it too much, okay? And then the same thing with growth. We want to be able to grow and rebuild, but we don't want that too much. Think cancer, think obesity. So just keep that in mind, okay? So even though our body is going to be in this breakdown mode while we're fasting, there's something else that's amazing that happens in our body, and that's the increase of growth hormone. So isn't this fascinating, the way that we're designed? we put our body in this acute stress. We deprive our body of nutrients and water, which I mentioned earlier. If you missed the earlier part of this live, check that out in the recording. So we're putting our body under this stress. Our body goes in and says, okay, old proteins, okay, strange viruses and microbes, okay, strange, cancer cells. We need to get rid of you. We need to purge those cancerous cells. We need to break down old parts. But at the same time, growth hormone is going up. So while we're releasing these proteins and things, growth hormone comes up and our body's like, okay, let's see what we can rebuild. What can we reuse? Our bodies are amazing. We just have to give our bodies the opportunity to do this thing. And when we're constantly giving ourselves food, we're not allowing this to happen. It's interesting, and I know I fall into this too, but it's like whenever we have a condition or we have a problem, it's like, what can I take? What are some things that I could eat? And sometimes I'm like, really, the answer may not be what can you eat. The answer may be what can you not eat, and maybe just avoiding things altogether for a certain period of time. Okay, gosh, there are so many benefits. I don't think I'm going to cover all of them, but I do want to cover this one. When we fast, scientific studies have also found that we increase brain-derived neurotropic factor. This is a neuroprotective substance, and it actually is essential for memory. It helps us to maintain our healthy neurons, and it also helps us to create new ones. Isn't that amazing? New brain cells. Okay, this is probably one of my favorite benefits of fasting, and it's called metabolic flexibility. What does that mean? So usually we're running on, meaning with standard American diet, and also maybe some other healthy diets, we're sugar burners. We burn a lot of carbohydrate. Our diets are generally more carbohydrate rich, and so those pathways for eating sugar, insulin going up, storing sugar into our muscles, liver, everywhere, and then excess into our fatty tissue, that's something that we are most likely very accustomed to. The other thing is that our body can break down other sources, other fuel sources to give us energy. Our body can break down fatty acids, fat, okay, and so that our body could use that breakdown and use what's called ketones. There are different types of ketones. So we need to allow our body to use different metabolic pathways for maximum performance. Right now we're seeing, I'm sure you guys are all familiar with this, the ketogenic diet is extremely popular. And I think that's more of a response of just our failed contemporary recommendations with nutrition. We're kind of going on the opposite end of the spectrum. So people are becoming fat adapted, which is good. I think it's a good thing to get fat adapted from time to time. The only thing that worries me is that people who are on a ketogenic diet for maybe 1, 2, 5 years, a strict ketogenic diet without any introduction of carbohydrates above 50 grams, what happens is that you start to then weaken those metabolic pathways that allow you to break down glucose properly. So it's like kind of not optimal on both ends. So whenever there is an extreme with carbs are evil, fat is evil, protein is evil. Like I just raise an eyebrow. I think we need to take a really balanced approach. So what fasting does is it allows us to go through a period of using up the sugar that's excess sugar that's in our blood, in our liver. Our liver stores glycogen, so we deplete those glycogen stores. That's why some people might feel a little bit shaky, a little bit not right when they're fasting in the beginning. That will pass. Talk with your doctor, but those feelings will pass. It just means that you're probably a really strong sugar burner and not used to breaking down other sources of fuel. So then we'll start to break down a little bit of muscle, gluconeogenesis. Hey, I need sugar in the system. But then after a while, our body will be like, okay, what else can I use? Our body will go into our stored energy resources, stored fat, and it will start to break down fatty acids for fuel. And this happens with fasting. So we're really exercising those, I was going to say muscles, but in this case, it may not work fully, but we're really exercising all of those different pathways that our body could use for energy. So that's something that I love about fasting. And I do want to talk a little bit more about diet. I mean, it's so general. There's so much to say in that field. But I get a lot of questions about the ketogenic diet. And I think there's a place for it. But I do also think that after maybe being on the keto diet for a couple months or so, then start to get yourself used to introducing carbs here and there, do more carb cycling. But in general, I do think our diet is very high in carbohydrates. Carbohydrate sources that are really healthy should come from our vegetables, really, or even like sweet potatoes and things like that. We need healthy starches, and oftentimes people who are on strict keto may neglect that. So yeah, let's see. What type, if any, would be beneficial for pregnant women? I'll have to go into that. Yeah. Actually, let me just tell you right now, for pregnancy, your primary goal is to take care of this baby that's developing in your body, and you don't want to put your body under a lot of excess stress. So the whole like hormesis thing that I talked about and all of that, you want to take it a little bit more easy with pregnancy in terms of fasting. I would say just explore a 12-hour window. Like a 12, maximum 16-hour window of fasting, and try not to exceed that. Keep yourself hydrated, keep yourself, eating really healthy foods. I'll do a whole thing about pregnancy because that's a special topic. All right. If I missed anything else, just resurface it, please. Something else, so ancient healing philosophy. So now I've talked about all of the science. Let's go to the other end. Some people may call it more esoteric or whatever, but that is a part of my practice. So I need to go into that. So in traditional wisdom, oftentimes it's recommended to start a new regimen or a new ritual or something new with the new moon. So it's believed that at the time of the full moon, a lot of our, in Chinese medicine, evil qi or parasites and things like that are heightened. They're more active. And even us humans, emergency rooms have a lot more patients coming in during the full moon, amazingly. So it's a time of like a lot of chaos and hyperactivity and all of that. So it's actually for a lot of women, it's a time of ovulation, so heightened fertility, time to, if you want to get pregnant, that's the time to, maybe start trying. So the full moon is not necessarily a good time to start a routine, a regimen. You want to start with the new moon. And fortunately, Ramadan actually starts with the new moon. So like around the new moon. So that's nice. So if you're going to start a new process, like not just Ramadan, but like intermittent fasting in general or anything, start that with the new moon and have solid intentions. So let's talk about that too, your why. Simon Sinek, he kind of created more of a big splash about this. What's your why? And in reality, whenever you start anything, you want to know why you're doing it. So really sit and ask yourself, what is my intention behind this? What am I trying to gain? So, with Ramadan, it may be, increasing your spirituality, your connection to your creator and all of that. Maybe also to just be healthier, to lose weight. So when people say I want to lose weight, even with that as a goal, you have to attach more meaningful things to it. So ask yourself why multiple times. So let's just use the weight loss one, for example. So I want to lose weight. Why? So that I could look good. Why? So that I could, have it be a good example for my kids. Why? So that I could, build confidence in them and exercise with them and all of that. You see how like those as you go deeper, the meanings are, it's more meaningful. Why? So that I could live longer and be with them and see them through their, life milestones, like all these things. So always give yourself some deep reasonings why you're doing something and solidify your intention. And that way you'll be stronger with temptations that come ahead. So that when you do see that nice brownie on the counter, you're not like so bothered by it. If your intention is strong, then you won't be so bothered by it because you have this like higher purpose. Okay? All right, so let's talk about, so in general, how we should be eating in Ramadan. So we should be eating less. There is actually a saying of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him. He said, "The offspring of Adam fills no vessel worse than his stomach. Sufficient for the child of Adam are a few morsels just to keep his back straight. If he must eat more, then a third should be for food, a third for his drink, and a third for air," right? So we eat a lot more than we likely need to. All right. So and then also you want to remove processed foods. Why? Think about it. When you've been fasting for a while, our insulin sensitivity is stronger, which is really good. But your body is going to literally like soak in whatever you eat. So if we have, junk food, our body is going to soak that in and use that for fuel. Do we want that? No, of course not. We want to give our body the most nutrient-dense, healthy food to build on, right? So when we're fasting, we're in a catabolic breakdown state. When we are eating, we're in an anabolic building state. So ask yourself, is this food that I'm eating going to build me up in a good way or no? Is the satisfaction only from here to here, my tongue, and that's it? Or is it going to satisfy my whole body? So ask yourself that. For suhoor, so this is the morning meal before you start your fast, you want to be careful with high glycemic sugary foods because they cause a ripple of hormonal changes that lead us to eat excessively. So if you think about it, when you have like if you have like a piece of cake, you feel like you could eat more and more and more of that. You're not ever really satisfied, right? That's because insulin is really high, and it's like, hey, I need more sugar to store because I'm here and I'm ready to do my job. So you want to avoid that. You want to stick to nutrient dense and fiber rich foods. Suhoor is the time to have the highest fiber foods because it'll fill you up. It'll keep you fuller for a lot longer. So dates are what are recommended, from the Islamic tradition, and yes, it does have sugar, but it is actually considered a low glycemic food. So you can have dates, and you can have foods that are high in fiber. So you can have like dates mixed in a chia pudding. You can have apple cider vinegar. Actually, apple cider vinegar and water. That is an appetite suppressant, and it also it'll help you to process the sugars that you eat in a slower way because it helps with regulating blood sugar levels. Roasted vegetables and things are good at suhoor time. I personally, from my experience, don't really eat much during suhoor. Like, I'll probably have my apple cider vinegar water. I have a certain drink that I'm going to share with you guys in another time, but it's basically a mix in a smoothie. Apple cider vinegar, a little bit of black seeds, a date if it's a big one, or 3 if it's the tiny ones, and a little bit of Himalayan sea salt. And I mix that all, and cinnamon. I mix that all up. I'm going to talk with you guys about that in another time because the time is going by so fast. I didn't realize. And if you're also worried, like let's say you do get really hungry after suhoor, but you do still want to eat something, then have something that's really bland. So bland foods psychologically are actually, and there's research behind this, they make you not want to eat much after that. So don't have these savory iftar leftovers at suhoor. Have something that's really bland. So Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, peace be upon him, he actually recommended having fresh dates. Well, he would have fresh dates if that was available. If fresh dates were not available, then he'll have dried dates. If dried dates were not available, he would only have water. So just so you have some context there. Another thing that's really good is figs soaked in olive oil. So this is also a Islamic food. Watini wa zaytun, the fig and the olive. The olive oil fats. There's actually olive oil is such a good healthy food, but olive oils, the fat from the oil will also help the blood sugar spike from the figs not be so high. And figs themselves are high in fiber, but they are still pretty high glycemic. So say if you're going to have treats, I mean it is Ramadan, so if you're going to have some treats, save it for the very end. Like after you've had a really nice filling, plant-based, good, healthy vegetables and all of that, then you can have your sweets after. And this is like all of our moms have told us, right? Like have your dessert later, like because that way you'll be so full and satiated that you'll be like, do I really need this? Probably not, right? Another thing is fermented foods, so things like sauerkraut, kimchi, apple cider vinegar is a fermented product. Prebiotics, so you want to replenish your good gut flora with probiotic-rich foods, fermented foods, but you also want to feed your good bacteria, and that's with things like with prebiotic-rich foods. So there's a list of prebiotic-rich foods. I might do a post about that. But some things are like garlic, onions, asparagus, artichoke, tiger nuts. I don't know if you guys have heard about tiger nuts, but that's actually really worth getting. Tiger nuts are high in resistant starches, which basically they break down in the small intestine. And they actually feed your gut flora and increase circulation in the intestine. So resistant starches are good. Another way to get resistant starches is surprisingly from potatoes and rice. So the way to do it is when you cook or boil your rice and potatoes, make sure to cool it down and then heat it again. And then you can cool it down and heat it again, but just once is fine. And that actually increases the resistant starch contents in your potatoes and rice. So a quick tip there. What else? Oh, fitness. People ask me about this. How should I work out during Ramadan? I still want to be able to work out. I suggest that you still work out during Ramadan. Do not let go of your workout regimen just because you're fasting. But take it a little easier in this way. You can still do some intensity. And let me give you my tips. So I generally like working out in the morning. It doesn't always work for my schedule, but I like it. But in Ramadan, I won't work out in the morning. There's no way. So after you have your suhoor, the last thing you want to do is a high intensity training, only to find that you can't eat anything after that. And your muscles and your body is like, hey, all of my cells are open and ready to take nutrition. Where's the food? Oh no, sorry body, you have to wait quite a few hours for me to give you anything. Don't do that to yourself. After suhoor, unless you're somebody who wakes up, I don't know, at like 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. and want to work out at that time, I still don't suggest that actually, even just for our circadian health. Use that time for worship. After suhoor, you can still do something, okay? So do some light walking, do some yoga, lots of stretching. I like Tai Chi and Qigong, just a few minutes of that. Stretch yourself out, and that's also going to relax you and help to decrease cortisol, which is our stress hormone. That's inevitably going to be on the rise when we're fasting. So do that. Another thing during the day is just to do a lot of walking. If you get hungry, walk. It's actually going to speed up your body's release of internal energy stores. We are filled with energy stores just right now. Like, I can go for days and my body will still have energy stores. People fast for days. This is like, right, Ramadan is considered still pretty easy compared to other forms of fasting, and it's a blessing from God that He, that's what's required for us, something that's more moderate. So, and then in terms of high intensity interval training or resistance training, keep your muscles strong in Ramadan. I recommend, if you can do this, an hour or so before iftar. So before you break your fast. If you're like totally exhausted and not feeling it, then don't do it. Okay? But if you're feeling pretty good, you feel okay, and you know that you're going to be eating in about an hour, then go for it. Do some good, weight training, do something that's a little bit more energy intense, and then you'll break your fast, and then your insulin sensitivity will be even more high, so that when you do have that date, your body's going to be like, I'm going to take all of those nutrients in. So it's actually, I like that schedule. So you'll break your fast on your date, and then you do your maghrib, your prayer. Give yourself a little bit of time, have a little bit of soup or something, and then have your main meal. Ease into it. So don't break your fast on samosas, on fried foods. You can have that maybe a little bit later if you want. Oh, and also, actually I wanted to share these hadith, which is a saying of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The house in which there are dates will never go hungry. So it's because it's such a nutrient-dense food. And then also the house with vinegar will never be poor. So vinegar is also a really good prophetic food. So I wanted to share that with you guys. These hunger tips. So real quick, I have a few minutes here. If you feel like hunger is an issue, which of course you're gonna know that you're gonna experience hunger. I mean, we're fasting, especially in the first few days, the first week, it can be a little bit more intense. But there's a difference between true hunger and more of the perception of hunger. Okay, true hunger actually is a sensation that you feel in the throat and the roof of your mouth. It's not necessarily grumbling and all of that. That is, oftentimes we actually will have more ghrelin. Ghrelin is the hunger hormone, okay? There's leptin and there's ghrelin. Ghrelin is the hunger hormone that actually will increase during the times of the day that your body is used to eating. So if your body is used to always eating at noon, your body is going to release ghrelin and be like, hey, I'm waiting for that meal that I'm used to you giving me. Where's my food? But what will happen is that whether you've eaten or not, ghrelin will actually go down. So give yourself, it's like a wave. Hunger comes in waves. It comes and goes, comes and goes. And in fact, people who have done extended fasting, meaning 24 hours plus, like 3 days plus, the ghrelin, the hormone, doesn't just increase. So if you've been fasting for 3 days, it's not like your hunger on day 3 is going to be worse than your hunger on day 1, believe it or not. Ghrelin will actually steadily go down, and there's research behind this. You can look at the work of Dr. Jason Fung and Dr. Joel Fruman. Okay, so don't worry about that. When you're feeling hungry and all of that, just know it's a discomfort that's going to go. So when we know things are temporary, it makes things easy, right? And another thing is that how to reduce hunger, make sure that your suhoor and iftar foods are very nutrient dense, high in micronutrients. We focus so much in our culture right now on macros, so carbs, protein, and carbohydrate, and we don't focus enough on getting those micronutrients, those antioxidants, those polyphenols, all of these minerals and things that our bodies thrive on a cellular level. So make sure that you're eating really good nutrient-dense foods. Who should not be fasting? People who suffer from type 1 diabetes should be careful and most likely not fast, but you can talk with your doctor about this. Talk with your doctor about everything that I say, okay? I'm not giving any medical advice here. It's all educational. This is not a doctor-patient relationship. Type 2 diabetics may be able to fast under medical supervision. And if they've prepared themselves before Ramadan for a few weeks by going a little bit more lower carb and extending their windows of eating a little bit further and monitoring their medication intake, they may be able to. So talk with your doctor about that too. Breastfeeding women should be careful. If you are exclusively breastfeeding, your baby is less than 6 months old and relying on you solely for nutrition, then you want to be careful. There is something called non-diabetic ketoacidosis. It is rare. It's not the same thing as ketosis, okay? Nutritional ketosis, those are different. Ketoacidosis is actually very dangerous, so you want to be careful about that if you're exclusively breastfeeding your baby. Pregnancy, I talked about that. Foods to eat, talked about that. Let's see, hunger, talked about that. Muscle cramping. So muscle cramps can happen for all kinds of reasons, but usually it's from a mineral deficiency. It could be magnesium, it could be potassium, it could even be sodium. Okay, so let me give you some information about sodium. When our insulin is low for a long period of time, we actually flush out a lot of sodium, a lot of salt. Insulin helps us to retain sodium. So when we're eating a diet where our insulin is low, so when we're fasting, our insulin is definitely pretty low, right? We lose salt, and that causes all kinds of issues. Sodium is extremely important for cellular communication. And I'm not talking about table salt. Table salt is toxic. I think you should avoid that. I'm talking about mineral-rich salt, like Himalayan pink salt, or volcanic salts and things like that, lake salts. And there is a solution that you can actually make from salt. It's called Soleil, and that I will have to do another post for, because it's actually 100% worth doing and having in your house. It will make such a big difference with your hydration, your muscle cramping, your fatigue and irritability, and everything while you're fasting. Another thing is fulvic acid. I'm taking notes for myself, actually, on what I'm going to be doing other posts on time. What type of micronutrients, foods to break your fast with? I would say that dates are really a complete food in and of itself. It's a sunnah food, so this talk is mostly focused on Ramadan. When we talk more about intermittent fasting in general after Ramadan, and some people are going a little bit more low carb or carb cycling and all of that, then I'll talk about some other things. But for the purposes of this live, I would say that dates have a lot of really good micronutrients in them, and then also make yourself a vegetable or a bone broth that's also nutrient dense. Man, I missed a lot. Will this be saved? Yeah, I'll save this. I know it's going to be available for 24 hours after. I've done another live before and I didn't know how to save it. So I hope that I'm able to save this one, but it will be available for 24 hours. If I can, then I will save it and then I'll post it somewhere where it's more easily accessible, like maybe on YouTube or on Facebook, things like that. All right, so I have to end right now. It went much longer than I thought I would, but I think we covered a lot of ground here. I think I'll definitely do a part 2 and 3 and all of that too. I took some notes on things that I'll talk about next time. But did you guys find this helpful? Let me know. Good. All right, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day, your weekend. Happy Mother's Day to all the mommies out there. Big hugs to you. Take care, and I will see you another time. Assalamu alaikum. Thanks, everybody.